Okay, take it away, Ron.
Matthew Metz is the founder and executive director of Coltura and a graduate of the University of Chicago and the UCLA Law School. He founded Coltura after purchasing his first electric car and wondering why his friends weren't also making the switch. It's a nonprofit dedicated to changing the way Americans use and perceive gasoline. He's responsible for project design, fundraising, articulating vision for the organization. He's got a whole bunch of things he did before he founded this, but you can come up and read that afterwards.
Thanks a lot, everyone, and it's really an honor to be here. I'm so pleased. I just also like to recognize a couple people, our board member, Carlos Manzanero, who just done an excellent job. We have some volunteers, Daniel Steinberg and Neil Lewis there as well, so thanks to them. Okay, so, let's see, yeah, so really the story of my involvement with gasoline, with electric cars, starts with my daughter. You know, she's 11 now, but just wondering, well, what kind of world is she gonna create? And you know, I've had some luck in my law practice, so I had the ability to start working on a different project. And around that same time, as you mentioned, I got my first electric car in 2013, and you know, I just wondered, you know, why are my friends doing this? What is it about gasoline? You know, just really starting to delve into the question. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit about what I've learned about gasoline over the years. And you know, it's something that we just take so for granted. It's just like, you know, go out, get gas, get milk, get bread. You know, it's just become a staple of life, and we don't really think about what it is and what its impact is on our environment, on ourselves, on a lot of different things. So that's what I'm going to touch on here. So probably a lot of you know the story. I mean, you know, the gas that a lot of you guys came here with that's in your tank, you know, 300 or 400 million years ago was fish or plants, you know, in the ocean, you know, and eventually, you know, that became, you know, they died, their carbon got sort of stuck in a rock, and more pressure, and then as you can see there, the oil was trapped down there, where it sat very tranquilly for a couple 100 million years until, you know, right at the turn of the 20th century, when we found out, hey, wow, we got oil all over the place. In fact, it's just right under the ground. We can get it so easily, and we can make a lot of money selling it. And it's incredibly full of energy that we can use to power this new, you know, industrial revolution that we're going through right now. But it has some drawbacks. So,
just a few.
Okay, so yeah, so I mean, basically what gasoline is a lot of these really heavy carbon atoms surrounded by hydrogen atoms. And so what happens is when they, you know, exposed to oxygen, when they're combusted in your car, the hydrogen atoms go away, and it picks up two oxygen atoms, every carbon atom. And so all of a sudden, you know, if you carry around a gallon of gas, you know, it weighs about 6 pounds, but by the time you're done with you know, combustion, you've released 20 pounds of CO2 in the air. Okay, so I don't know if we have some mathematicians here, but in Washington, we use right around 3 billion gallons of gasoline every year, and actually about another billion of diesel, mostly for trucks. So 3 billion gallons a year times 20 pounds of CO2 per gallon, how many pounds of CO2 are we releasing every year in the air in Washington? You know, it's 60 billion just from cars, and this is only one, you know, medium-sized state. So here in the Puget Sound area, it's about 35% of our carbon comes from cars and trucks, on-road vehicles. The single biggest source. And of course, we know what the connection is between carbon dioxide and global temperature, and what the impacts are. So there's really 5 parts to the gasoline cycle. So there's the extraction, that's taking it out of the ground. There's moving it either from the oil field to the refinery, or from the refinery to the gas station. And then, yeah, there's the refining, getting that thick crude oil and make it into light gasoline that you can put into your car. You're storing it at various places, most commonly in gas stations, under the ground. And then there's the use. Now, all of them have very significant environmental impacts, but today I'm just gonna mainly talk about the last part of it, the use. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that combustion of gasoline and diesel for cars and trucks is really one of the biggest killers in America. So MIT did a study. They came up with analysis of 58,000. Other people have come up with larger or smaller numbers, but it really is a very significant killer in the United States. People that live near highways, busy roads, are the most affected. There's, you can kind of plot cancer and a lot of diseases. The further you are from the road, the less likely you are to have some of them. But don't think just because you live far from a busy road that you're getting out of it, because cars actually trap exhaust gases. So you're actually better off standing, let's say in a traffic jam, standing by the side of the road, breathing in the fumes, than you are inside your car when you think, oh, well, I'm inside the car and I'm fine. Actually, the car actually acts as a trap for those gases, and the concentrations of some of the chemicals are higher. Okay, so, I've talked a lot of bad about gasoline, right? So what's the alternative? How can we get off it? Because that's the most common thing you hear. Well, how are we gonna do this? And actually, I'm gonna be on Cairo tomorrow talking about it, and I've heard the host talking about it. Oh, this is unrealistic. We can't get off gasoline, or if we can, it's not for another 20, 30 years. And how am I gonna tow my boat? So actually, it turns out that there's pretty good answers, so I'm just gonna kind of run through this for you really quickly. But really, the story doesn't start right now. It starts over 100 years ago when Thomas Edison and Henry Ford were first thinking about how are cars gonna be propulsed. What is it gonna be? Is it gonna be electric or is it gas? And they actually both of them agreed that electric was a better way to go. But the battery technology wasn't quite as advanced as it is now, and also at the same time those huge oil discoveries were happening, and so history kind of diverted towards the gas car for the last 115, 120 years. So one of the things that you sometimes hear is that, well, electric car is just a coal-powered car, and it's really not any cleaner. You got to think about where the original source of power comes from, and a lot of times that's fossil fuels. There is some validity to that, especially, there is some gas, but there actually are a bunch of studies done by reputable organizations on that very point. So for the average EV in our area, the Union of Concerned Scientists calculated it's about 96 miles per gallon equivalent in terms of the carbon that's necessary to push the car down a road, let's say 1 mile, or versus a gas car. So about 3 times more efficient than the typical gas car. Here, where there's a lot of coal in the energy mix in Minnesota, for example, so you have 38 or 50 in Ohio. It's at like that, so it's not that great, but it's still pretty much better than any gas car. But actually the newer EVs like Tesla and they are very efficient in using electricity. So it's actually right now it's about 4 times. So it's about 130 miles per gallon in the overall big Northwest power mix, and in California it would be 147. But actually, if you live in Seattle as I do, it's pretty much 100% clean power already. And based on the bill that was just passed the legislature last year, by 2035 we'll pretty much be at 100% clean in Washington as well. And that's something that gas cars are never going to be able to do. They're not really getting any cleaner. I mean, the technology's maxed out at what it is right now, about 25 miles to the gallon, 30 miles to the gallon. Yeah, I'd say we're headed to 100% renewable. So I'll just talk briefly about, well, what are the biggest barriers to EV adoption? So there's 4 of them: cost, models, range, and charging. So I'll talk about each one of those. On cost, so right now it's true if you go to a dealer, the average electric car, let's say at least on the low end, is maybe $5,000 to $10,000 more expensive at the sticker price for pretty much the same car. Like you can get a Chevy Bolt now for right around 30, and maybe the equivalent car would be like in the low 20s, something like that. But by and a lot of the reason is because of the battery cost. So this blue right here is the percentage of the car cost, it's the battery cost, but battery costs are dropping really fast. And so Bloomberg and others predict by 2024, 2025, within 5 years, the sticker price of a electric car is gonna be at parity with that of a gas car. And then ultimately, electric cars are gonna be a little bit cheaper because they have a lot fewer moving parts. It's a much simpler process. So if you can master manufacturing the battery more cheaply, then the rest just kind of follows suit. But you know, the sticker price, when you go to the dealer, that's only part of the equation. So what are the other big costs of operating a car? Well, it's gas and maintenance. So the cost of propelling a car a mile down the road is about with electricity, is about 1/4 of gasoline. So let's say you can drive from here to Bellingham, it would be, let's say 4 gallons of gas times 3, $12, and you could, let's say 100 miles, and you could do 100 miles with, so 25, it would be 25 kilowatt hours, which times 8 cents, so it's about like around $3, $3 or $4, something like that. Okay, and then the other big advantage is maintenance. So a gas car has lots and lots of different parts. It has, it's complicated transmissions, spark plugs, fuel injectors, lots and lots of stuff. Electric cars is very simple. It has about 20 moving parts in the powertrain, so it's a much simpler powertrain. So both the state of Washington and the state of New York have done analyses of, which car should we buy for our fleet, because they operate thousands of vehicles. And so they found that even though, and this was actually in 2018, that they looked at a Chevy Bolt that cost me $31,000 and a Ford Focus around $17,000, but they found over 10 years actually the Bolt was cheaper because they saved so much on maintenance and some on fuel, that over the what's called the life cycle of the vehicle, which they said is 10 years, it's cheaper. So right now we're going through kind of a revolution of EV models, and actually I could probably make this slide better and have more different models because there's a lot more coming. But now, we have, in addition to nice Teslas and Souls and things like that, we have the new Cybertruck. This Rivian's coming out with a truck. We have a big SUV. Tesla's coming out with a mid-sized SUV. So there's just a whole range of models. So pretty much any car you want right now can be available in electric, or if it's not this year, it'll be next year, and you can find pretty much equivalent electric. Another big issue you hear is, well, like, I'm worried about range, range anxiety. So how far can I go with my car? And out there I have a Nissan Leaf that goes like 70 miles. That was a 2013. But some of the newer, pretty much all the newer cars go over 200 miles. Actually, the Teslas are at 300 right now and climbing. So the range is really increasing. I think Rivian's new truck is going to be 400 miles. So the range is really increasing a lot. And there's also lots and lots of fueling options as well. So most people fuel at home. I think about 75 to 80% of EVs are fueled at home, and some are fueled at work. So most people just plug in when they get home at the end of the day and do their thing. So these are just some of the different options. So within your car comes it's called a 110 charger, and you can just plug that into any wall outlet and charge your car. It's kind of slow, but it works. And then curbside charging is becoming more common. This is just kind of workplace charging, which exists at a lot of workplaces. And then there's many, many other charging options as well. That's one that's done completely with solar power. Okay, so road trips is a big issue, right? It's like, well, sure I can drive around town, but can I go where I want? So these are all chargers right here. The brown ones, I think the high speed, and the green ones are lower speed. And this is the whole Northwest. So this is Washington, Idaho, Montana. So you can pretty much drive wherever. Tesla in particular has done a really good job with their charging network, but you can go pretty much wherever you want right now with an electric car. It may take longer, especially if you got like a Chevy Bolt. I have a Chevy Bolt, and So to charge that fully on the road, it's maybe an hour and a half. But the new Teslas, the Tesla Model 3, for example, can charge 180 miles in 15 minutes.
Wow.
But,
When they have those stations at motels and stuff, do they charge you for charging the car?
you know, it really varies. So some will. Most of the time, I would say no, but some might. It just depends on the relationship that they have with ChargePoint, the charging company, and things like that.
I was gonna say, I drove a car down to my kid in Texas last year, and, so I drove from here to San Antonio, and there were some Tesla charging stations in very, very remote places. It was very interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, Tesla has it worked out, so you can
Yeah.
basically drive across the country wherever you want to go, you know, and it works. Yeah.
The reason I asked the question is I'm aware that electricity costs multiple times what we pay for it here in the Midwest per unit. And I just wondered how generous businesses are for my next road trip.
Yeah, well, so I would say that when you're on the road, that it's probably not gonna be that much cheaper than gas. Like if you're going on a road trip and, you know, some places maybe you'll charge for free at some places. Other places it can actually be fairly expensive. It can be 50 cents per kilowatt hour, which is maybe 5 or 6 times what we pay to plug into the wall here in Seattle. So
Wow.
there's a lot of variation. And the charging industry is still, I would say, in its maybe a little bit past, it's like a toddler or something, but it's not that advanced yet. And so it's kind of non-standard, and you don't know exactly what you're gonna get. But you can make your way across the country in pretty much any electric car, with, I would say, with the possible exception of a Leaf or something like that that has a really short range. Like the car maybe with less than 100 miles range, I wouldn't want to try it unless I had a lot of time. But the newer ones, yeah, any newer electric car you can go across the country. In Tesla, you can do it pretty much as fast as you could in a gas. Yeah, so these are the Tesla. They're called V3 superchargers. Again, 180 miles in 15 minutes.
Is there a standardized across the industry on the charging
Okay,
stations?
all right. So this is the deal. So basically, any car can charge. Well, at these, it's kind of complicated, but basically there is one kind of plug. I don't have a picture of it, I don't think, but there's one kind of plug that pretty much fits in any car. And Tesla has an adapter that can fit into their car. But you can't just take any car and go to this Tesla supercharger. It has to be a Tesla. So,
Okay.
but
Thank you. That was my question.
for slower charging, yeah, you can, like, pretty much any car can do it. For kind of DC fast charging, high speed charging is not Tesla. There are 2 protocols, and it's kind of complicated, but yeah.
Tesla's not the only one that has the super fast chargers. They're just, Tesla wants you to buy a Tesla, so they want to make it really easy for Tesla owners to get across the country. But there are super fast chargers for anyone with an EV. They're just a little harder to find.
Well, that's true, but the thing is like most cars can't really take it. Like the Chevy Bolt, like it cannot take 200 kilowatt charging. It can take 50.
New Leafs do.
Oh, they may
Is that
go
true?
faster. I don't know how fast they take it, but yeah. So anyway, yeah, and it's definitely improving every year, and there's more options, and a lot of investment is going into that. By the way, when Volkswagen they got into all their problems, they had to settle with the federal government for $2 billion for lying and cheating about their diesel emissions. But the good thing is a lot of it went into charging, and so they're building out a charging network nationwide that can be used by pretty much any vehicle. So let's talk about, like, well, why is it so hard to stop using gasoline? If you just park your car out on Aurora, you'll see that 99% of the cars that go by are gas. So what's the problem here? Well, one thing, it's only started since 2010. The EVs, I think, first ones, the Leaf came out in 2011. But still, even to right here, it's 0.9%. So we didn't reach 1% until 2016, and then we got 22.1%, and then actually we declined a little bit in 2019. So it's not this like upward, exponential growth like we saw with a cell phone or something like that. So why is that? Well, one thing is that gas cars are actually pretty satisfactory technology. I mean, if it worked for the emissions, they'd be fabulous. There's no, go anywhere, you can do a lot of stuff. So EVs are great for the environment, they offer an excellent ride and things like that, but don't provide, massive capability that a gas car doesn't. I mean, there's a few things I could go into, but in general, it's pretty much the same experience. So people that are happy with their gas car and don't care that much about the environment, they're golden with their gas car. So that's a big barrier. Just habit. People are just used to that every week. I go fill up the gas, I swipe. It's just accumulated habit over many years. And then meanwhile, while they're swiping, they're sending, collectively tens of billions of dollars to the oil industry, and making that a very, very powerful industry that can exert its influence in many, many different ways. And so they get big tax incentives, tax write-offs, much more than electric cars do. They fund very powerful disinformation networks at all different levels, from the university just to mass media, but they're very active in talking, figuring out ways to frustrate electric car growth. There's a new trend that's coming out of Colorado. It's called freedom to drive, and your roads, your rides, your rights.
Yeah.
So the idea that basically the gas car is written into the 27th Amendment to the Constitution.
Yeah.
That's how I'm not touching it. I have the right to drive, and so that touches a powerful chord within people, and it's sometimes hard to overcome, especially in the Republican Party. That really counts for a lot. So I'll just tell you, there's a lot of different efforts and different ways people are attacking this problem, but I'll just tell you the way that our organization is doing in Coltura. So you may have heard that in Europe, a lot of countries are talking about phasing out gas cars. So in 2025, Norway and Denmark are not going to allow new sales of gas cars in those countries. And then 2030, the Netherlands is going to do the same. And then 2040, France, actually United Kingdom, a couple of weeks ago, they moved from here to, and they said 2035, and now they're saying 2032. So they're moving. So this is an international trend. So again, the concept here is that you can't sell new gas cars into the market, but if you have an existing gas car, you can keep it. So Coltura's been working for a couple of years, actually 2 or 3 years, with Representative Macri to introduce this legislation in Washington. So you may have heard of HB 2515. So that would require that all new cars be electric in Washington beginning 2030. All 2029 and earlier cars are grandfathered, the way we talked about. So this was our first year, but we had actually a pretty good year. We had a hearing in the House Transportation Committee. We had 9 co-sponsors, including a lot of powerful committee chairs co-sponsored it. We have lots of media on it, and we're preparing the ground for a bigger push in 2021. We figured out who the enemies are, what their objections are, or the opponents, and kind of how to do it. So we're really going to come back strong next year. And then this bill that was just.
Can you go back to that other slide? Just tell us what those countries are.
Okay, Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, Austria, Israel, India, Germany, Slovenia, Scotland, France,
Slovenia.
and United Kingdom.
Slovenia.
Slovenia.
Although Melania is not on board.
Yeah, well, the Slovenians are ahead of us.
Oh, that's so sad.
Indians are too, and that's.
And then, so then this is the bill that was just talked about right now. So it's called Zero Emission Vehicle ZEV legislation. And what that does is require a minimum number of cars that a manufacturer sells in the state. So let's say General Motors sells 100,000 cars in Washington State. They don't, but let's say they did. So the 8,000 of those would have to be electric by 2025. Okay, so and if they didn't reach it, they'd either have to pay a penalty to the state or buy credits from someone who has an excess of vehicles, i.e. Tesla, or someone who's really rocking it with their EVs. So this is a bill that Washington should have passed it for a long time ago, but there was kind of a bad deal done, and so it's actually written into law that Washington is not allowed to fix it. And so for the last 10 years, people have been trying to fix it. I think this year, we're gonna be able to fix it. So actually, Coltura put together a really huge coalition that's never been seen before of environmental organizations, EV organizations, health organizations, League of Women Voters, a lot of EV companies, and there's actually like a pretty strong group behind it for the first time right now. And so we're gonna try to get this thing through and make a big show of force. And so, actually, I think, I'm sorry, your name?
Leo.
Oh, Leo? Leo was just saying that, you know, to make some calls tomorrow, or tonight actually, for the hearing tomorrow, and you know, to get this thing through, and that's be one of the biggest EV victories in Washington State history, probably the biggest. Another thing that we're working on as well is we think that there should be a moratorium on new gas station construction. There's no reason to build new gas stations, you know, putting out, you know, more infrastructure like this. And I'll tell you, every single gas station in the United States is leaking, is emitting vapors, is creating a mess. And, you know, we're not saying take away anyone's gas station yet, but what we are saying is don't expand the mess. Don't make more mess in more places, expanding this gas, you know, economy elsewhere. Let's put it to an end. So yeah, so it's just, you know, and these are kind of things, a lot of people think that gasoline policy can only be made at the federal level, but actually there's a lot that can be done at the state, in fact, and local level. In fact, this is the only place that you can have action. You know, good luck trying to move something through Congress right now or over a Trump veto or whatever, but we can actually be extremely effective at state and local level, and so that's where we're focusing. We also think that we need to change the culture of gasoline, that you know, as I talked about, there's a long habit of using gasoline and people are really used to it and comfortable with it. So how do we break that habit? So we've kind of tried to illustrate the problems with it different ways. So this is the gas trap. This is kind of a performance art and sculpture. And so as you see, it's connected up to the tailpipe, and it fills with smoke. Oh. So I'm not going to tell you where the smoke comes from. And so this is so we've done various, these are called the gas ghosts. So these are performance artists with hoses and nozzles and white suits. And so we've done this both in Seattle and San Francisco and other places. And this is kind of an easy one. If I had time, I'd show you the video, but we don't. So we have a video on gasoline that if you go to Coltura's website, you can see. Again, we don't have time to show right now, but it's a pretty good video, fun video about gasoline, a music video. So that's basically it. So we need your voice, and thank you so much for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions after or talk about it some more. And we have some actually I mentioned we have two very knowledgeable EV guys here as well, so Carlos and Daniel, so they can answer your questions pretty well as well. Okay, so thanks so much.
Questions?
Okay, hi, go ahead.
I'd like to buy an electric car, but my husband is not quite in that frame of mind. And so we're sort of compromising on a hybrid. And there are some that you can plug in and some that have its own battery. Do you want to talk about that? Is that helpful to buy a hybrid? Is
Yeah, I
it
mean,
better than a gas?
I consider a plug-in hybrid electric car. There's actually fewer and fewer of them available, but there are some pretty good ones, and there's some excellent deals. Like the Hyundai Ioniq, my brother is paying like $69 a month for the, you know, on a lease for it. It's like, there's some of them are really, really cheap. You know, and that has to do with certain incentives, you know, and that's a different state, but you know, but yeah, I'd say if it's kind of, you know, a healthy step towards an electric car. And, you know, for most people, those plug-in hybrids go 25, 30 miles before they switch over to gas. So, you know, for most people, that's, you know, 90% of their driving. So.
Well, what about the battery ones that are not the plug-in, but they're hybrids with the, and disposing of that
yeah, I mean,
battery?
I consider that like a Toyota Prius. I consider is a very efficient gas car, but
Yeah.
I consider that basically a gas car because you can't move with it without using gasoline.
Right.
Yeah.
And it goes to gas a lot, more than people realize.
Yeah, I mean, it goes like 40, 45 miles a gallon.
You can think about where does the energy come from. If it's coming from the gas, it's a gas car. Even if it stores it as electricity for a little bit, it just changes the time it does it. If you're also considering an electric vehicle, you can look into the used sales market as well. It's a good way to get in.
Interesting.
We are very lucky. There's a shop just south of the stadium. It's a private dealership. The owner there is an electric vehicle enthusiast, and it's all he does. So when you go to this place, you can buy an electric vehicle to come around town and city as low as less than $10,000. It's a couple of years old. It's got 20,000 miles on it. But all of a sudden, it changes the economics. You're not thinking about a $40, $50, $60,000 very shiny brand. Like, well, if I want to try this, are there other options? And there are. We're lucky here that that dealership is there.
What dealership is that?
I don't want to try advertising, but that's just it.
I'll tell you, so it's like Paramount
It's
Motors
Paramount
Northwest.
Paramount
Yeah,
Motors.
Northwest, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
How long do the batteries last?
Okay, so that's.
And then how do you dispose of them or whatever?
All right, so the first question is really is very incomplete answer because most like 90-something% of electric cars are still on the road, and those that have been in accidents, the batteries tend to be recycled. So, but actually, it's very promising. The long-term prognosis for batteries is that one of the main things that they're going to be used for is grid storage. So you can put them all in an array and store massive amounts of energy. And like actually, Carlos and I were talking with the Rivian people recently, and so Rivian actually is designing it so after you want a new battery, you can just take it out, put the car battery on your wall. It's like a Tesla power wall as a backup system, and put a new one in. But my belief is that the batteries are going to be 100% recycled, and yeah.
Have they begun thinking about are any of the cars doing any self-generating of the motors?
You mean like have like a solar panel on top or something like that?
Well, no, it self.
Okay,
Okay,
go ahead.
let me see if I understand your question, because that's really true. Is when you brake,
Yeah.
you charge the battery. All of the cars already have it.
Oh, they do have
They do
self-generating.
that already. It's very funny. I'm driving an electric vehicle that's 2014. It's got 50,000 miles on it with the original brake pads. Every time I go check in the summer, they tell me, "Oh no, you still got a ways to go." Their minds would be blown. It's over 10 times what a brake pad should do, exactly because of that. When you start the brake, it charges the battery. And also to complete the battery question, when the battery is over or it's done, it's down to 70% of its original capacity. It's not over by any means. This is why Rivian said that could power your house for 20 years. All we need to do is adapt it to your electric system. It doesn't turn into pollution like gas does. The battery continues being a battery for pretty much a long time.
Any more? Okay, back there.
So you're gonna talk about 8%, you require 8% of the manufactured cars to be electric by 2025, but then you said that there's offset whereby, car manufacturers could just buy credits from Tesla because they're EVs, and so they're no longer, required to come up with the 8%, so what's the point of that? Why not just leave that up? They don't get to buy those credits.
Well, all right, well, that's actually a good point, and I guess what you can say is, well, it functions as an incentive, but, so that program I told you about, it has to be passed cookie cutter, like every state has to pass exactly the same bill, and if there's any deviation, that's why Lael said something about don't do the amendments, because if there's any deviation from that,
Okay.
then it becomes preemptive.